What is going on, Trash Talkers? We're back with another episode for you. In today's video, we're going to be talking about one rule change that we think should be implemented in each sport. We're talking NFL, NBA, MLB, UFC, and the NHL all together. All that and much more coming your way right now! Hey Trash Talkers, it's Mike here. Over 93% of you who view our show each and every day are not subscribed to the channel. If you could hit that red subscribe button, it would help us out tremendously, and it is completely free for you guys. If you want to stay up to date with our daily content, then click that bell icon and you will be notified every time we go live. Nick and I both really appreciate you subscribing to the channel, and we can't wait to keep making more daily content for you. All right, Nick. Well, today's video is going to be a little different. I think that with some of the things that we've seen throughout sports, and especially recently, we keep talking about things we would change, things that we want to see happen. So I thought today would be a good idea to kind of look at what rules do you want to change in professional sports? And yeah, I'll even include college a little bit here because college athletics are some of the most fun sports to watch. And I want to start off with a couple of these sports that we're really interested in. Let's start off with the UFC.
Yeah, I mean, the UFC is one of the biggest rising sports right now in the United States and even abroad with the amount of talent that you can find all around the world. And the UFC is doing everything in their power to expand their audience all over the globe. And they've got to get a couple rules under control if this thing is really going to take off to the moon, right? So, one of the biggest problems I have had as an MMA fan in general is that judges in the UFC do not have to have MMA backgrounds as it stands. Most of them, if not all, have boxing backgrounds. They do not understand the ground game. They do not take it into consideration when they are scoring fights. And a lot of people's games now are accomplished on the ground. And when you're saying, "Oh, I'm gonna count all these punches and kicks in it while they're standing up," and I'm not going to count, all the work they're doing on the ground and working for positioning and the positions they have, I think that's absolutely preposterous. So we need to have these judges be more well-rounded. They need to have an MMA background, whether that's their former coaches, their former fighters themselves. They have to have been involved with the sport at some point. They need to understand the fundamentals of MMA as a whole, not just one part of one martial art. All martial arts. They need to understand boxing, they need to understand grappling, they need to understand positioning. All of it needs to be taken into consideration. That way we can get away from these ridiculous scorecards that leave us wondering how some fighters win their fights or why some fights are split decisions when they're clearly unanimous decisions.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that the judges for the UFC should be UFC centric, right? They should have a background in MMA versus being boxing or wrestling even. I mean, when you take a look at what MMA is, it's a culmination of all of these things. When your judges only have one experience, one way of knowing how to judge, and that's how they've gotten to that position, I think you're already at a disadvantage. So if you have that judge that, say, was in boxing, in a, say, lightweight fight that's going to be mostly on the ground, especially with like the champ, Charles Oliveira, who likes to go to the ground. What are we really doing here? I mean, he's not going to, that judge, he or she, they're not going to know exactly what they're going to be scoring. So it's tough for them to really put their name on something that they don't know how to properly score. I think either Dana White needs to come up with a way that these judges become more UFC and MMA centric, or like you said, it needs to be former professional fighters that get into the judging game and really learn how to be professional judges for the sport. Either way, I think I like this change. I think it would really help the sport of the UFC a lot. My rule change for the UFC would actually be before the match even starts. at the weigh-ins, and nobody would be allowed to be overweight for any fight. So currently, as it stands, you can't be overweight for title fights only. And if you're within a pound, you can still fight with no issues whatsoever in the UFC. I'm taking that all away. In my opinion, you guys are professional fighters. If you are overweight, you do not deserve to fight. In fact, my way of changing this rule is that not only shouldn't you be allowed to fight, but it's an automatic loss of a purse, and you should be either given a no contest or a loss. And I'll explain this here. I believe that when you come in overweight, your opponent will have the option to say, I'm going to fight this person, yes or no. If they choose to fight this person, if the person who came in overweight loses, it's just a loss, right? If the person who came in overweight wins, it's ruled as a no contest and they still get 0% of the purse. I believe that you have to come in underweight, you have to come in shape and ready to go. And if you cannot make weight for your division, for your weight class, then guess what? You are not meant to be part of that division. You are not meant to be part of that weight class. And I believe that the UFC has to become a little more strict on the rules that they have set in place for this sort of thing.
Yeah, I like that rule. I think that it's important that we standardize the weight limits across each division, not allowing non title fights to be 1 pound over the weight limit. I do agree with that. It's going to be a little hard for a lot of fighters to get on board with losing an entire purse if they're off by a half a pound, but I could see how that would be enough motivation to definitely make that weight cut. So I think that this is a strong rule that would definitely eliminate people missing their weight and definitely improve the responsibility of the fighter to understand the division they're in and make that current weight. So I like that rule. I think that's solid. The UFC's got a little bit of work to do. MMA overall has some work to do. I think that this is a good starting point.
All right, up next we have football. And Nick, let me toss it over to you. Which rule in football, either professionally or in college football, do you believe should be changed?
Yeah, I'm glad you put it that way because my rule really falls with the NCAA football. I think that we need to standardize how many feet need to be in bounds for football players as a whole. Currently, as it stands, the NFL has 2 feet in bounds. The NCAA has 1 foot in bounds. I think that we all need to come together and agree that 2 feet is the proper way to play the game of football. It really separates the real athletes and the real playmakers from those who just get lucky because it really takes a lot of skill to hone in your craft and understand and know that you need 2 feet in bounds. You need to know where your placement is on the field. It's a lot harder than just having 1 foot in on the field when you have guys that are 6'6", 6'7", as tight ends, big wide receivers. These guys can just rely on their size and not their athleticism to make plays far away from out of bounds. Whereas you see guys like Julio Jones or Odell Beckham Jr. making acrobatic plays to tippy toe the sideline and make spectacular catches. We need to see more of that because that really separates who's a good wide receiver versus who's not.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that 2 feet in bounds makes sense, and you know, college is the next level, is the next level after high school, but it's also semi-pro if you think about it. I mean, these guys are really auditioning to make it to the professional leagues, and how do you audition if you're not doing it the way the professionals do it? So I agree with that. I think that would be a really good rule change for NCAA football. Um, I, I I have two rule changes, and I think one is pretty simple. But the first one I want to talk about is actually the overtime rules in the NFL. I think we need to do away with the one touchdown wins the game type of scenario in the NFL. If you think back to the Atlanta Falcons Super Bowl, if you think back to Tom Brady beating the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, if you think back to some of these controversial overtime games where a touchdown has won and the other quarterback never even got to touch the ball, I think that is a major misstep on the part of the NFL. I understand that the NFL doesn't want games to go on as long as certain baseball games do. But I also believe that the NFL understands that people are very in tune with their sport. They understand the competitive nature that it provides. And if you have a game that is so competitive that these teams are going back and forth, you're going to have to show that both teams continuously go back and forth, because you never know when a team is going to make a stand, when they're going to make a stop, when they're going to assert their dominance on the other team and get that done. If your quarterback never gets a chance to assert their offensive dominance, I just don't understand how you can really say that the other team won that game. So I would change it to look a little more like the NCAA rules, where both teams have a chance going in, but instead of from the 35 or the 25 like in college, I'm going to say you have to go from the 50-yard line in. There's no kickoff, there's nothing like that. You go from the 50-yard line, and then if both teams score after that, it's automatic 2-point conversions. We're not going to continuously go back and forth. We need to set a rule so that these teams continuously go. And I also want to as part of the overtime, you have to get rid of ties. I'm sick and tired of ties in the NFL. It screws up the standings so profoundly that it just certain teams get into the playoffs when they shouldn't because another team had a tie. It's really bad. So that's the rule that I really want to focus on. But I also wanted to take a look at the NFL and say college cannot be the only way to get into the NFL. And I think the rule change needs to be not that players should be able to come out right out of high school, but that they shouldn't have to wait 3 years to get into the NFL. I believe that if you're talented enough as a freshman in college, or as somebody who, came out of high school and has continued to work on their craft in a different league, maybe say the Arena Football League or somewhere else. If you're only 1 year removed from high school, I think you should be allowed in the NFL. I don't believe that you have to wait those 3 years to be eligible to join the NFL, especially when injury is such a big risk in the sport of football that you could end up costing your career before it even gets started. So I believe that the NFL and the NCAA need to work together in cohesion and figure this out and say players don't need to be a 3 year before eligibility. I think that one and done gets a lot of negative review in college basketball. I think in football, it would also make sense, though. I think one and done makes a ton of sense for not just college, but any other league that players out of high school choose to go to.
Yeah, and I think that's also going to give a lot of legitimacy to other smaller forms of football, such as the fan controlled football league, the XFL, the CFL, all these other smaller leagues around the globe now get more legitimacy. They can grab talent right out of high school, and those players know that they can make a little bit of money while playing at a professional sport, and then they can easily transition into the National Football League in a year. So just like basketball does, the NBA does, I think that's exactly what the NFL should do. I like that rule. Now, for the NBA, I think there's only one rule that I see that truly needs to be fixed, and that's to make the game more exciting. How do you make the game more exciting? You implement a 4-point shot. I want to see guys like Steph Curry and Kyrie and James Harden, Kevin Durant, all these guys. I want to see them shoot from the rafters. I want to see them make these long shots. Why does a spectacular shot have to be a dunk or a three? Why not make a 4-point shot? And I think putting a spot right next to half court is exactly where it needs to be, because that's where we see some exciting plays. That's where we see some buzzer beaters. I think if you want to make games a little bit more interesting, make it a 4-point shot. If you're down by a couple buckets, you can easily get that back with one long range shot. I think this would make the game a little bit more exciting, turn those end of game situations where we're kind of scrambling to get some points. You can now take a longer shot and potentially put yourself right back in the lead.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think it would definitely make for some fun times. And look out, Steph Curry's about to be the all-time leader in four-pointers made in the
Oh
NBA.
yeah.
But I'm definitely for that. And just to note, you named four players: Steph Curry and then three Brooklyn Nets. So I think that would be a very scary thing for people that have to face the Brooklyn Nets. But either way, I'm on board for this. My rule change in the sport of basketball would be pretty simple. A lot of people that used to love the sport of basketball, love the NBA, they hate it now. And a big, big, big reason is because these players are so notorious for flopping. It's absolutely unreal. The flopping has gotten out of control. It has, and I think it needs to be addressed. So I believe that if there is a flop, if there is a noticeable flop by the referees, it is an automatic technical foul. And not just one of those technical fouls where, it's a game violation, but one of those technical fouls that actually counts towards a disqualification. I want a technical foul that if you get a technical foul for flopping, the next time you're out, and it's going to count towards your season limit with the NBA as well. I need players to understand that flopping is not tolerated. This isn't soccer. This isn't, that sport out in Europe. This is basketball. And if you're going to flop, you better be sure that you are one hell of an actor or actress, because at this point flopping is so out of control that players are getting called for fouls that never even occurred, and the refs don't know what to do. I think this needs to be changed, and needs to be changed fast.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that some of these players are auditioning for Broadway with the way they're flopping out there. I think you're absolutely right. They need to get rid of flopping altogether. They need to make the punishment much more harsh, and I think this is exactly the way to go about doing that. Now, on to everybody's favorite sport, baseball, the most exciting game in all of sports, the most fast paced game in all of sports, right? Am I right? No, I'm not. They need to speed up this game. It has to be faster. We need to have some type of timer on this, and I think it has to do with pitching. There needs to be a reduction in the time between pitches. You should not have more than 15 seconds between each pitch. It does not take that long for you to throw a pitch to home plate, get that ball back from home plate, and then reset. It's not that hard. You're not going through many motions that you need to pick up a bag, dry off your hands. You need to put some pine tar on. I don't care. You don't need it. It doesn't take that much. It's gonna make pitchers who are really good stand out. Those who need that extra time, they're gonna suffer. You shouldn't need that extra time. If you need that extra time, maybe you need more time in the minors to really understand the game of baseball and to get to that next level.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned pine tar, and it's understandable because you're a Yankees fan, so you're used to cheating. But pine tar is not allowed for those of you who don't know the rules of baseball. But nonetheless, I agree with this rule. I believe 15 seconds between pitches is perfect. Is perfect. I mean, it's not too little. It's not too much. It's going to help speed up the game a lot. And on top of that, I believe that this is going to allow for more offense, essentially. I mean, if you're going to continuously move the pace of this game, the bats are going to have to be flowing a little bit more. So I think you're going to see a lot more offense. You're going to see a lot more strikeouts. This game's going to move. I'm really interested in it. And just as a side note, some of these MLB fans, these baseball fans that try to quote unquote gatekeep the sport, really piss me off, because all they care about is keeping the integrity of the game, and that's not how it's supposed to be played. It's literally the old guy chasing you off his lawn. I mean, they do not want to see change for the life of them, and you guys know who you are, so I don't want to hear it from you. Essentially, baseball needs to change. It needs to get faster. This is 2021, not 1921. And at this point, we have to move this game along. Otherwise, I'm going to continue sleeping by the second inning, and then I'll wake up in the eighth inning to see whether I should go back to sleep or not. That's pretty much where we are. But my rule is actually to undo a rule that they've already implemented, and that was putting a runner on second base. This needs to go. I saw this happen, I think, the second day of this season in a Yankee game, no less. And I literally watched the Yankees lose a game because there was a runner on second base, and that was the end. It was over. They couldn't do anything else. They were like, "Are you serious?" One single drives this guy in, and we lose by a run. I understand. I think that's stupid. I think it's pointless. That is their version of trying to speed up the game, and I think you're just giving teams an advantage. Because it depends on where you ended in your order. If you ended 7, 8, 9, and the sixth guy is on second, versus the team that has the 9 guy on second, and they have 1, 2, 3 coming up. I mean, they're pretty much the odds are in their favor. They're going to win. So this rule needs to be undone completely.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, you never know who's going to be on second base. It could be your DH, it could be your speedy center fielder. You don't know who it's going to be, and then it all it takes is one pitch. As you said, I don't agree with this rule. It's affected my team in a negative way, and I just don't think altogether this rule should have been put in place. I think that this should have been weeded out in the minors first or in another league before the MLB brought this in. But this is not a good rule to have. And finally, for our last rule change for hockey for the NHL, currently as it stands, if a team is on a power play, the opposing team who is down that player is allowed to ice the puck. I don't think that should be the case. I believe if you are down a player because they did something wrong and they are in the box and the opposing team is on a power play, you should not be allowed to ice the puck. You should only be able to work within the confines of the rules. You are down that player because they did something wrong. They need to be penalized. The entire team also needs to be penalized for that. You do not get some sort of grace to be able to ice the puck and get out of certain situations just because you're down a man. That is completely against how this should be played out.
I like that rule. I think it would definitely provide for a lot more power play goals. I believe. I think you know trying to get the puck out of the offensive zone of the opposing team is really tough, or out of the defensive zone, right? I mean, if you can just ice it, there's a reason that rule exists, right? You don't want that puck being sent across ice all the way to the back end, and they have to go fish it and then bring it all the way back into the offensive zone. It's really just slowing down the power play. And I understand that you're trying to give the team that is that has a man down a fighting chance. I understand that. They don't deserve a fighting chance. They're down a man for a reason. So I like that rule change. My rule change is simple: eliminate shootouts in overtime. I'm just tired of watching shootouts. It it honestly does nothing for the sport of hockey to watch a shootout occur, because the teams have already secured at least 1 point through overtime. Overtime hockey is one of the most entertaining factions of sports that you could possibly find, because it is sudden death. The next goal wins and everybody has a chance at scoring a goal. There's no, it's not like football where only one team gets a chance. It's all on it. And you know what? In a shootout, it's like you could have a good night, you could have a bad night. It's really a toss up, and I just don't like that. I think that the better skilled team should win. In fact, in overtime, I also believe it should be 5-on-5 instead of 4-on-4. I don't think that we should do any 3-on-3 stuff. I think it's got to all be 5-on-5. Let's continue playing. And you know what? I understand that players are going to be tired. Hockey's a very demanding sport on the body. Just don't go to overtime. It's that simple. Don't go to overtime. Score more.
Yeah, somehow this is the only rule I don't agree with you on. To me, shootouts are one of the most exciting parts of hockey, just like I think that PKs are one of the most exciting parts of soccer. And I think that you need to have a barrier between ties and wins and losses. You need to have something that says this team deserves to win, this team deserves to lose. You can't just have these games ending in a tie. You're not going to continuously go into triple overtime throughout these games in the regular season. So I think that they should stay. I like this rule. I think that shootouts should exist. I think that they are one of the more exciting parts of hockey. It's even better than sudden death, because if you score one, the other team scores one. It's back and forth, back and forth. You're on your edge of your seat waiting to see what happens, and it only takes a split second for the game to be over.
All right, well, that's going to do it for now. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell. We go live every single day. That'll be all. Peace and love.